Hey everybody, Plushie here. With the Little Big Tengu event released on NA, it is finally time to make a review on Taira no Kagekyo, and considering how many bosses and challenge quests I've soloed with her, I feel like I have a lot to say about this servant. So without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy my personal take on Taira. Taira's first skill is a 30 MP battery with a 3-turn 200% anti-Genji power mod and a 3-turn 100% crit up, and finally it also gives her allies a 3-turn 100% crit star absorption down. The 30 MP battery is nice, it's flexible, it helps her MP quicker, and the 200% anti-Genji power mod seems pretty insane. It is one of the highest anti-trade damage skills in the entire game, and it also makes Taira one of the highest damage ceiling characters in the entire game. However, the Genji servant pool is extremely limited, so in most cases this is going to be a non-effect. However, it is okay because this skill also comes with a really solid 3-turn 100% crit boost buff. This is a really rare effect to have such a high number on. The other servant I can think of is Muramasa, which we just got. However, this is usually not the case. Most of the times these kinds of skills only have a 50% crit boost. So this is really powerful and is a main source of damage in terms of Taira's face cards. And finally, the 100% star absorption down on her allies is, in my opinion, a worse version than a straight up star absorption up skill. However, it still does the job in a team, and especially on an Avenger, these kind of skills are important because they struggle to absorb stars. Taira's second skill is perhaps one of her most iconic, especially in solos. It grants her a one-time 3-turn Guts that revives her at 3000 HP that is stackable with other Guts, even with itself. It also increases her own insta-kill resistance by 100% for 3 turns. It also grants her a 3-turn buff that allows her to gain a Vengeance stack buff whenever a Guts effect is procced, and these Vengeance stack buffs last for a whopping 10 turns, and they boost her MP damage by 25%, and it stacks all the way up to 4 stacks at max. This is perhaps Taira's core survival skill. It is a Guts effect with an extremely short cooldown, especially if you pair it with Atlas Mystic Code, where you can even stack it with itself if you max this skill. This is definitely a super powerful skill when you're using in solos, as you know, Guts effects in solos are really good if you see other servants such as Herc or Gramps, because whenever a Guts proc, the enemy stops all their movement and it's a guaranteed survival skill. And at the same time, Taira can also gain insane amounts of MP damage with the Vengeance stacks, and they last so long. 10 turns is usually the entire duration of the fight. So this is actually really insane, at the same time boosting her survivability as well as her offensive ability. The insta-death resistance up for 3 turns usually doesn't come into play. However, in certain really niche situations, such as the recent Beniema altar fight I've done in Lost Belt 7, this effect actually plays really heavy into how this run ended up working. So yeah, overall, extremely solid skill, the best Guts skill in the entire game, period, in my opinion. And finally, her third skill is a 3-turn 2-time evade with a 3-turn 30% attack up and a 3-turn AoE curse for 500 damage. This is a good skill to complement her second skill, which gives her even more turns where she doesn't take any damage. The 3-turn 2-time evade is quite standard on quite a bit of servants. However, if you put this on a already solo heavy servant like Taira, this becomes a really crucial survival skill that really pushes her ability to survive on her own. And the curse is usually just a meme, so I really wouldn't take it too seriously. The 30% attack up for 3 turns is not too crazy, but it is really decent in boosting all of her different types of damage, and it stacks really well with other types of buffs, especially her crit up on her skill 1. Taira doesn't have any insane passives. However, one thing to note that her Avenger passive is rank EX, which increases her own MP generation when getting hit by 22%. And this is actually quite important because when you're soloing, you're taking all the hits from the enemies and you actually gain a bunch of passive MP gain just from being hit. And this allows Taira to loop her MP extremely easily. And finally, her MP is a 10-hit single target quick MP that buff removes the enemy before the damage lands, and it also, scales damage according to how many vengeance stacks you have on you, which I mentioned in skill 2. And finally, the overcharge effect is a 5-turn curse that scales from 1000 all the way to 5000. Now this is a really good MP. The 10 hit single target quick MP allows her to have pretty good refund after the MP itself, and also generate a ton of stars, guaranteeing her a crit brave chain every single turn, even when she's soloing. Buff removal is such a premium effect, especially on a spammable MP like Taira's. It can remove pesky defensive buffs, guaranteeing the damage to land, and it also can remove annoying offensive buffs that can potentially increase a bunch of pressure on you or even ruin your entire game plan, such as buff removal on attack effects or invo pierce effects. So really insane effect, even though it's really simple. The MP scales with the vengeance stacks, as I mentioned before, which basically allows her to have a 100% MP boost for the entirety of the fight if you're soloing high pressure fights. So really strong, and can even make up for a lack of MP levels sometimes. And finally, the curse is actually really high at OC5. It's 5000 for 5 turns, and I have seen it utilized in some curse teams. However, she's definitely not a staple in one of those curse teams compared to some other servants. So how do I feel about Taira? So first of all, actually, let's talk about her in teams. Because she is mainly a solo servant, and people expect solo servants to be horrible in teams, I think it's not the case for Taira. I think Taira performs pretty well, and I have used her in a couple of min turns, and she has worked really well overall because of the following reasons. Her first skill is really good. The 30 MP battery pairs well with Scotty's 50 MP battery and Taira's Max Dollar Pen 2. The 3-turn 100% crit up is just good in any case because it's one of the biggest numbers crit buffs in the entire game. And the star absorb down on her allies definitely is a team skill, and it helps her as an Avenger to still absorb most of the stars. Her third skills, evade, is really good in a team as well because you can't really control where the enemy hits when you're in a team, and you don't really want to waste those 2 hits if the enemy just decides to focus on her allies. So that lasting 3 turn is pretty decent. Obviously, also one of the big factors is Taira having a spammable buff removal MP. This is going to be really useful in harder quests and boss quests that like to spam buffs. Obviously, there are still problems with Taira though. The elephant in the room being her second skill, basically being useless in a team. A 3-turn duration Guts is so hard to control when to proc when Taira is in a team, and you know, Guts doesn't really stop the enemy's action after it's procced, so the enemy can easily just proc it and hit her again and kill her off. I see some people suggesting gonging her, but it's also not worth it. Unlike Hijikata, Taira only gets 25% MP damage up when she's being gonged, so you might as well bring another support. Another problem, in my opinion, is Summer Scotty, because Taira has a double arts double quick deck, and in a lot of the min turns now with quick servants you want to use Summer Scotty, and Summer Scotty boosts buster cards, and Taira only has 1 of them, so that actually comes into play a little bit more than you might imagine. But on the flip side, Taira is chaotic evil, so she is fully Dolman compatible, so that kind of, you know, makes it up for it. Now let's talk about solos, which is basically what Taira is built for. Personally, I group solo servants into 2 types. The first types are servants that have extremely good heal and sustain, such as Barghest and Alter Ego Kiara, where basically if the enemy don't one-shot them, they can never die. The second group are servants that utilize Guts, Evades, and Invols and other effects to guarantee their survival for multiple turns, and they can handle high pressure quests very well, such as Herc, Gramps, and Taira. And personally, I think Taira is the strongest in the second group in terms of solos, and here are a couple reasons why I think that. The first reason is that Taira is an Avenger, and an Avenger with a EX rank passive at that, meaning that she gains a bunch of MP just from getting hit, which really helps her loop her MP. Secondly, she has a really short cooldown Guts, and when paired with other survival skills such as her skill 3 evade and other Mystic Code skills, especially Atlas Mystic Code's cooldown reduction, she is able to have a constantly up Guts effect, allowing her to never be caught without a defensive skill, and she can always survive with that. This is particularly powerful as Guts really don't care about how much damage an enemy does in solos, it just tanks the damage, and also whenever she procs that, she gains a super long lasting MP damage buff. The next point is sort of a follow up to that. those vengeance stacks lasting 10 turns means that whenever she MPs, she will have that boosted in the majority of the fight. And considering how easy it is for her to loop her MP, her cumulative damage is going to be really high compared to her other competitors, which are usually relying on face card damage. Her buff removal MP can deal with a lot of disruptive effects that can screw with your solo game plan. Also, this type of solo servants usually are put on a clock because they don't have enough survival skills to outlast the enemy indefinitely. So having this effect to remove defensive buffs on the enemy and speed up your kill is also important to her solo plan. Her extremely high hit MP and her good star gen on her quick cards allows her to loop her MP really easily and generate fully critted card chains every single turn, sometimes even consecutively when you keep doing MPQQ and the enemy has a high enough hit count. And finally, her extremely powerful 100% crit boost for 3 turns means that she doesn't really need an external buffer to have already good face card damage. So overall, Taira is going to be both really high on face card damage and MP damage when she's soloing. Not to be an arrogant prick, but if you go onto YouTube and you search FGO Taira solos, you are going to see a lot of my videos, and I feel like I have provided enough proof, more than enough proof, that Taira can handle some of the most difficult quests in the entire game. She's able to handle super long gauntlet challenge quests such as Summer 5 challenge quests that last more than 20 turns, or can fastly finish off single target bosses, even really tough ones such as ORT, Gaetia, and Beast of Cherishment. Taira can also even solo easier quests such as Prison Tower Gauntlet quest or some other bosses like nerfed Kiara without even using a CE. I think all of this proves that Taira is the top of the food chain in terms of solo units. All that being said, considering the roster that is going to be released this year, which is extremely powerful, including stuff like Oberon and Koyan Sky of Light, which are top tier supports, Taira might not actually be a must pull in my personal opinion. Even though she performs pretty decently in a team and she's an insane solo unit, you can just borrow one most of the time. Considering if you're running her in a quick team, especially after Summer Scotty, you will be able to double Scotty even if you don't have Taira herself. And especially on solos, you will always find that Taira simp who has a fully built Taira that is going to outperform your own Taira in most cases. So if you really want to solo, you can just borrow one, and solo is also usually not the most meta way to play the game, even though it can be extremely satisfying, and sometimes you're just gonna put her in anchor, and when you need an anchor servant, you can just use a weaker one such as Herc, which is way more accessible. So overall, I think Taira is absolutely insane. I think she performs both in teams really decently, might not be better than some of the best, but already pretty good and above average, and she's probably the best solo servant in the entire game right now. So yeah, if you really want to pull for her, especially higher MP levels, she's definitely not going to disappoint you. Even at MP1, I bet you'll have a lot of fun with her, especially in solos, considering that Vengeance stacks really makes up for her MP damage. However, she is definitely not a must roll as she barely affects your farming, and she also can easily be borrowed and perform just as well, or even better if you have a super built Taira on your friends list. Usually this would be the end of the video. However, as a Taira enthusiast, I want to share a couple of tips that I've learned over the years in terms of soloing with Taira. So the first tip is when you're fighting a high pressure boss, you can actually try to proc her own guts to speed up the clock. The fastest way to do this is to use her second skill, immediately use Atlas cooldown reduction, and you can stack the skill again after 2 turns, meaning you have a 1-turn window of having 2 stacks of the gain vengeance on guts proc effect. So you can gain an immediately 50% MP damage up for 10 turns. And on the next turn, you gain another 25%. This simultaneously puts the guts in cooldown faster and also gains you a whopping 75% MP damage up for basically the entire match following up. So you can very drastically shorten the amount of turns that you need to kill the boss. However, if you are fighting a more long gauntlet quest such as Prison Tower, I actually prefer preserving the initial HP bar, as you don't really need that MP damage boost to kill the individual lower HP bosses in these kinds of quests. A lot of times you might even need to do card MP card to clear a wave, so you'll mostly rely on a card crit damage, which would usually be enough because her first skill is such a powerful crit skill. Next tip is that don't hesitate to use your MP as much as possible. I know it does have a buff removal effect, but because of how easily Taira can loop her MP, you should just use it to push damage whenever you can. There are really niche certain cases where if you know you can't refund this turn and you know the enemy is going to cast a very nasty effect on the next turn, mainly like break skills where you can expect what they're gonna do, then you can save your MP. But other than that, I would recommend just spamming it whenever you can, because it's going to be every other turn or sometimes even every single turn. The biggest point in the Taira solo, in my opinion, is to time her second skill right. This is really hard to explain, and you might need to learn this from experience, and it varies from quest to quest, but you really have to understand how much damage the enemy is doing. Don't activate the guts too early so it doesn't proc in 3 turns and you just waste a skill, but also don't proc it too late so you don't get extra cooldowns in. Basically, the optimal way to do it is to have the guts always proc on the last turn of the guts duration, which is 3 turns. So understanding how much damage an enemy can do in 3 turns, it's super important. If you can squeeze out the maximum amount of cooldown turns between these guts, Taira is able to survive multiple turns from this one effect alone, comboed with her skill 3. You should use your skills as much as possible. I see a lot of people saving their skill 1 because they want to save the 30 MP battery. Oh, I already have a maxed out MP, why should I use the battery? However, in my personal experience, the biggest value on her skill 1 is actually the 3-turn 100% crit buff. It massively increases her face card damage, so you want to keep it running. You want to use it whenever you can and boost her overall damage. And considering Taira's Avenger passive and her really good crits and her pretty decent face cards, you really won't be needing that 30% in a lot of cases for the MP gain, so you might as well use it for the crit damage alone. Skill 3 is a little bit more complicated because the evade effect sometimes needs to be timed alongside the guts timing to, guarantee her survival, but if you can, still try to use it as fast as possible because you want to push as much damage as possible. Shortening the clock of Taira solos is also really important in its success. And finally, for solos, I will tell you that you have to max all their skills because cooldown is really important in solos. You want to use your skills as much as possible, you want to squeeze as much value as possible, but if you're really low on material and you really just want to solo with Taira, my recommendation on skill leveling is maxing skill 2 first and foremost because that's super short cooldown, and then maxing skill 3 because that's also a survival skill, and then finally going back to skill 1 because that doesn't concern your survival. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one, and good luck on pulling for Taira.